Not bad. I think I hit the open. Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Rich Ross with you here. It is Wednesday, February 14th, Valentine's Day for everybody in the U.S., for those who celebrate those kind of things. I am joined, as always, by my colleague, Chris Gomez. Chris?
Good morning. Like you said, it's apparently celebrated. And so I just, of course, because nowadays we have the internet. So from Britannica.com, I got that it's popular in the U.S., Britain, Canada, Australia, and also celebrated in other countries, including Argentina, France, Mexico, and South Korea. There may be more, but that's what the quick search revealed to me. So happy Valentine's Day to everyone. And here we are on the Dev Talk Show. Good to see you, Rich. And we've got a lot we're going to try to do in a short amount of time today. So.
Yeah, it has been a busy morning. I have been, I get in the office early. I have already been into our big theater that we have, we've got customers coming in today at 9:00. I've already had to reboot things in there because we had no audio. So, and I'm appropriately dressed because I have my little headset microphone to go in there with once I get out of here. So it's going to be a fun day, but we got at least the next 45 minutes where we plan to do a bit of show and tell with some of the stuff that we were able to get going with DevContainer. We didn't put it in the notes, but we think we might actually have this and be able to do a check-in and let Chris be able to pull it down on his side and be able to get the dev containers running in his world. So that's the goal. I am bringing up my machine so that I can share content across. There we go. That works. All right. And
yeah, and this all starts from our good friend Jeff Fritz.
Yeah.
Who is a Philly area guy. And we're super lucky when he comes in person to Philly.net and joins us. That's always super fun. And I just did that in December, right?
Back in December to close out the year, yeah.
That's right. And he has an app called TagzApp. And I believe, if I remember correctly, the way this whole thing started is there was an issue in the repo that was get this running in a dev container. I'm not sure if that was exactly the issue. And
pretty much. Let's see. We'll go and look at
we're looking for it. And so, anyways, the key is that. Yeah, there it goes.
There we go. It wasn't
the
there.
Key is that that's something we've done on this show quite a bit, and this show's been around. We've had 4 years worth of content on this channel. So some of it back when we were back in the studio live, and all through with our Wednesday night shows and everything. And we've done several shows on developing in a container with the dev container stuff, or really just this whole thought of any machine, sit down, work with your tooling, even work in a web browser. So since it was near and dear to us, it was like, why don't we figure out how to make a dev container configuration? And there were challenges.
There were a few challenges. If we bring up, so this is our, let me zoom in a little bit here. This is Visual Studio Code, which is, the tooling that we're using for navigating into our dev containers. We can see here one of the things that we definitely need to have in order to be able to do this is the dev container extension. So we need that in there. Once that's there, we're able to kind of bring in or do all of the cool things that we've been showing on the show here, and we can actually shortcut to those things just by typing in dev container from the palette menu. And you can see all the good things we're doing there. So you can always tell that you're running in a dev container. We don't have that installed yet. There we go. Because down here in the lower right corner, it says this. There we go. It'll set it usually is two angle brackets pointing to each other, but in this case, it says you are in this space. You may get something similar if you're working in a code space, where I think it actually says instead of a container, it says you're in a code space. But so the idea here is this is where Visual Studio Code tells you you are remoted somewhere else. You're not running on your host machine. And that could be another virtual machine elsewhere. It could be code spaces. In this case, it's our dev containers. So our containers are up and running, and inside of Docker, and if we bring up Docker, we've got that here. Don't worry about that one because that was a test. But we've got our dev, essentially our TagzApp container here. And as we mentioned, and we've been showing, we've got two containers inside of that application when it kicks off and runs. One is our app, which is where all our code runs, and our web front end. And then another one, which is our DB1, which is our database. Now, the tricky part or the issue that we were running into, and feel free to, Chris, ask away any questions as we go through this, is we were running into an issue with getting access to our database, because when we set up those containers, it doesn't know about TagzApp. It didn't know any of the setup. So what we did was run -u for tags and D for the database. So this is just the typical, you've probably seen this a couple times on the show. This is how we connect using the psql command into our dev containers. We need the password, which is fine. There we go. And that, when we get that little Postgres and the equals hash, we're good to go. I can do a DU, which gives us our roles. So we see we've got our tags role there. And you'll notice here now we have DT, which is our tables. So basically everything that TagzApp, the application, needs to run inside of here. So we've got everything structured. Our database container has the database. Our apps container has the app. And they're able to communicate with each other. Although I'm doing this in a separate Ubuntu running inside of WSL2 on my machine. So from my local machine, I can talk to that database container as well. Let's go over to here, open up a command window, and we should have the psql command here, which we do. Cool. We'll do the same thing. Host, localhost, tags.
And in this scenario, this is you calling it, you're in the container here.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
You're in the dev container where previously, and I know it's a little, sometimes it's a little, where am I working right now? Just a second ago, you made this call from WSL on the desktop. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
So we got that. I think if I bring up dev, just to be sure. Yeah. So see this number here?
Yes. Right. Yep.
If look at this,
right.
That number, E6F19, maps to this that we're running in here locally, right? So we're rooted in at that container name,
right.
essentially.
Yeah. Root running on that machine. Okay. Gotcha.
Tying it all together. And we get that. We got Postgres, and we got DT. We've got our tables. And I'm able to see them from the container where the application runs. So if we've tied everything together, we should be able to do, well, let's go somewhere interesting. We got our app context, which is how we talk to the database. That's probably a good place to start. Let's just see if we can, on configuring, which is not doing, on model creating, which is not doing, well, it shouldn't be doing, let's see. Right now it's not letting me do a breakpoint, so I'm not sure how much we're gonna, let's see if we set this up first. We don't have a C# extension for debugging. Yes, what would you suggest? So
this is back where the C# dev kit isn't, and this has to be installed in the dev container, right? And this always takes us a little time. So,
right.
So yeah, we need to get this into the profile at some point. But in any case, because this takes a few seconds, so do you want to go through? Because I figure we can do this one of two ways. I can come to my machine, which has done none of this, and we can at least talk through some of the early steps where we use the dev container extension tooling to get a C# and Postgres container. I don't think we'd run through the whole thing because the show has a little bit of it has a hard stop for work.
Yep.
But if we can at least, while that is firing up on your end, we've always let's go ahead and install it, because I think we found that installing the C# dev kit takes a little time.
Yeah.
Not just because it's not that the extension I think is big or anything. It's because it goes and pulls .NET framework support itself to run it, and that takes some time. So, what do you think? Do you think?
So I guess I have to do a. I mean, if we do that, I have to put a. I have to basically do a commit and get this up into.
Well, I was thinking even because there were some stages to this.
Yeah.
One of the stages was just how you got started.
Oh, okay.
And then there was, okay, yes, we have C# and Postgres running in 2 containers with a Docker Compose, but now it had to be configured for TagzApp, and that seemed to be the trick.
Yeah. Now, yes, totally agree. I think we can run through that on your side. The other thing is to let it go, or the other possibility, because Entity Framework, if we look at what was in that, if we go back to here and we look at what was in not the update database, the extension, TagzApp context, right? So the TagzApp context, I'm going to close that so we can see what's going on, should, unconfiguring, if it's, well, that's null or empty. If I understand the way, I mean, it should create the model for us in the database on the first run.
Yeah.
As long as it can see TagzApp.
Right.
So that, I mean, that's my understanding of how the Entity Framework part should work.
You're right. It's just that we need a launch JSON file, right? That's the trick.
That might be the trick. Yes.
Yeah.
If it doesn't get included with what I check in, yes.
What's interesting is the other day I remember in the middle of this, you were asking the question, because, especially on this show where sometimes we are doing things live, and you can very quickly find yourself in a situation where you say to yourself, I always kind of knew how this worked, but then you find out like, oh, wow, there's so much more to it. And in this particular case, it was the question of, you had a launch JSON and a launch settings JSON, and we both kind of looked at each other and said like, well, wait, which one do we want again? And it turns out that the C# debugger in Visual Studio Code supports settings with launch JSON, launch settings JSON, or you can even use the settings.json file. But oddly enough, each of these different configuration options, they don't all support every feature of VS Code debugging.
Yeah.
So it becomes very interesting to pick. And so then the question is like, well, why do they even exist anyway? And it's because launch JSON, and I think I have this right. I want to say, when I say this out loud, I'm pretty confident I have it. I usually don't like to speak up and then send people off in the wrong direction. But launch JSON is a VS Code construct. Like it came with VS Code. It's kind of what made VS Code go from the beginning. But launch settings is a little bit more of a standard. I'm not going to sit here and tell you how many languages and platforms support it. Right. But a launch settings JSON could be used Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio, and I believe, well, I know for sure .NET Run takes advantage of it. And I think other IDEs in the .NET space use it, and not even just for .NET. Like, I think you can use it in more places. So there's a little bit of kind of, well, maybe that's a little more cross-platformy. And then settings is just the configuration of Visual Studio Code, which isn't exactly probably where we want this, because you would never commit that.
Right. Yeah, I wouldn't think you would do that. You would have something, your own version, essentially.
Yeah. But what I might do here is, let's see, I was just taking a look at my Docker setup here, and I don't really feel like I have a whole lot of containers or anything. So what I was thinking was, while this is installing, and hopefully it gets installed pretty quickly, because I think I'm going to go ahead and bring up my Visual Studio Code screen here.
Yep.
And that should pop up now. So
Yep,
I was just taking a look. Actually, maybe I should probably present something different, because the first thing I was going to do was drop out to out of Visual Studio Code. So I need the whole monitor. Okay. So here's my Docker desktop. I also happen to have an instance of WSL2. I was just double checking to see if I had pSQL installed. I don't. But and my instance is Ubuntu v20. I probably installed this years ago, and I don't know that I have a 22. I'm not even 100% sure. I don't know that it matters that much. Looks like I've got
you could quickly get it from this. You could quickly get it from the store. I will say, if you do when you install PostgreSQL client, you will need that may fail. I don't know if you've run that yet, but that may fail because it doesn't have all the latest updates.
Interesting. I don't know that I necessarily am going to need this.
It could come in handy.
So let's see. Let's let that do its thing. But
cool. The
way this all started, and you can actually find this in some earlier shows, is with the DevContainers extension, which is here. I actually have quite a few extensions installed. Is DevContainers extension is here and it's ready. Is that if I went to the command palette, I don't know if I could just come up here to the search bar. Maybe I can. No. So the command palette on Windows, Control-Shift-P, right?
Right.
Okay.
You get the little caret there.
Right. And there's DevContainers. At least here are some specific issues. And the one I was looking for was new DevContainer, right?
So
if I just wanted to get my initial that's not what's going to happen with you, because you've got it configured.
Right. Yeah. So if you just wanted to go through the process of creating a DevContainer, yes, that would get you there. With
new DevContainer, you get all these options, and I think are these options all driven off of the GitHub repo? If we don't know, I suppose that's okay.
They're driven off so if you go to on a browser, if you go to containers.dev, that's where the DevContainer specification is. And in there are a couple, it talks about the spec and it has the documentation, but if you look across the top, there is available templates and available features. So the templates is the one that we're looking at when we see, well, what kind of Docker templates do we have in there? If you scroll down there, you'll see our C# and Postgres. And that will take you out to the repo where that component lives.
Awesome.
Or that template lives.
Yeah, and I remember we ended up here. There was even a show where you ended up here looking through this stuff. And so in any case, because one of the things we were trying to do that was challenging was to say, I want to be able to sit down at a machine, no tools installed, and maybe Visual Studio Code, right? And the DevContainer extension. That's the bare minimum. And then this should just work. Well, that means you need a setup where you can develop a C# and PostgreSQL application, because that's what TagzApp happens to be. And so we're kind of lucky here that in some ways this is maintained for us. So if I click it and say create DevContainer, this goes to work. And this actually eats up some time too, right? Because it's going to be, it should be off and running. If I go to show log, it's off and running. It's pulling containers. If I open up Docker Desktop, we can see it's kicking stuff off because that wasn't there a second ago. And it hasn't quite started on containers yet. It looks, in fact, if anything, it's just building a volume to get started. So it's got some work to do. And I don't know if this will start up in time, but the reality is that was how we started, is we just basically said, okay, let's use this template. It comes up, but then we ran into issues. And that's some of the stuff that I think you can address just looking at the changes that you made, both in the DevContainer JSON and maybe the Docker Compose file. I don't know if you had to touch both places.
I did have to touch both places. So
Okay.
let's see if I can. Do you want to come back to me?
Yeah, we can go ahead and do that,
All right.
especially because hoping that we get this running in the next few minutes here.
Bring this down out of the way. So a couple things we needed to do when we, and I'm going to just bring up a couple different files here. So you talked about the dev container.json. That's one of the core. If you're doing dev containers, you're definitely going to have one of these. And what this gives us is essentially a definition for any application that understands how to interpret the spec later. Interpret the spec, this is the information you need to be aware of, right? So where am I getting my image from that we're going to dev container into? So in this case, it's basically saying, hey, you can pull it from a Docker Compose file. We could have had an image dropped right in there. And I think if you look at some of the simpler containers, they do just that. Basically like the C# one.
Right.
Our workspace folder, where are we going to start our work from? And then features. So we didn't go into it, but on that spec page, there's the list of available features. So those are the things that you could bring into your container that are made available. And there's got to be at least 100, if not more, features that you could possibly bring in. And the one that we're bringing in is this one that's focused on the Postgres client. So that pSQL command that we run to make our app container connect to the database over in our DB container, that's what we're using for that. And it's in the documentation that Chris showed in GitHub, but it's version 14 is what what is included inside of that container. This client will run for 13, 14, or 15, if I'm not mistaken. So setting it here just brings in the right one. And then in addition, there are customizations that we do in Visual Studio Code. So we know we want extensions like the dev kit, and we know that we want to turn certain settings on, like make the path available for where the .NET tools are inside of our container to make it easier to access .NET from wherever it is or .NET tools from wherever we're running our commands from. So this basically puts those in the path inside of the Linux container. So those are some of the things that we did that go over and above what you get out of the box when you say, hey, spin me up a dev container. Going a little more into some of the other files, we could look at the compose file because we made some changes there. Specifically, all of this is great what it gave us, but what we specifically wanted to look at was this one here, which is help us open up the ports. This is what made that DB1 container available not only to the app container, because that kind of happens by default in the way that this is wired up by bringing in this dev container template, but also to my local host. So when we did it from the WSL Ubuntu, we were able to connect into there. So that was the other change we made. And that one, I think I might have made it in an early version and then completely forgot about it in a later version. Like, yeah, that's why I can't talk to those things.
And that comment on line 37 confused the heck out of me.
Yeah.
Because it made me not do anything. Like I saw it where it said make sure you add forward ports to dev container JSON so that you can forward the database locally. Then that line 38, adding the ports property will not forward from a code space. So my brain said like, oh, well, I guess I don't want this. But without it, you can't use pSQL locally against it. And that was a real good debugging help for you. I mean, do you think it's required in the end game? Is having the pSQL client required, or is it just like, hey, I am a developer. When things go wrong, I want to be able to figure them out. So having it was super helpful.
Having it was definitely super helpful. I don't think it would probably be something. I think what we would probably do on check-in, like to clean it up, is to basically comment this out and say, if you want to communicate with this from your local host, uncomment this. Just because for troubleshooting, right? It takes something else out of the mix. I know I can talk from my machine to a database that exists somewhere, and does that traffic can I make that traffic happen? And I think that the simplest path, I guess, basically is, what we would try and put in place there. But yeah.
So what's interesting is if you go, it's this file when you go up further. Was this where you supplied the features, or was that the dev container?
That's the dev container. So the dev container has the.
So that's the feature of dev containers. And this is what's really nice, I think, about doing an actual project. We've done so many shows on dev containers. We've even used these options to add extensions and so on. but I never really knew about the features option, where
Mhm.
now it sounds like the DevContainer specs allows me as a DevContainer publisher to even make the container you pull down configurable.
Yeah, and
So,
personable or
right.
personalized.
Yeah. But which is, I'm not saying that that's bad. I think it's great. But the first thing that comes to mind when I think of containers is immutability. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean the container is mutable. It's not. It's still immutable. It's just what you're kind of getting to say to the template is I want a version with this set up in it. And
Yeah.
that's a neat little feature. So,
Yeah, yeah, and there's all kinds of great. So you can bring in Git, which I think is typically in there. GitHub CLI. So if you're used to using that for communicating with your GitHub, you can do that. Hugo, which is a
yeah,
what do we call
static
it? A
site
static. There you
generator.
go.
I mean, it's almost a mini. It's almost like a CMS at this point, except I think you still have to kind of have that developer mindset. It's not like you're going to open up a WordPress and just configure all from GUI. This is,
Right.
I get a great static site generator with a lot of plugins, but you still got to open the hood up a little bit.
Yep. Yeah, and then things you would expect, like Node and things of that nature. I think what I've been finding useful is this one here about and actually having a DevContainer template that is Python based. I had
Okay,
a
yeah.
project yesterday that was, and as I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned it on this show, but I know we talked about it. I repaved my machine over the weekend
Yeah.
based on that Docker issue I ran into. So it's kind of a clean machine, and I don't like putting Python on my clean machine just because there are, you can get into different versioning issues depending on what you're using. So anytime I see something have Python, I try and work it inside of a container. And this experience or a demo that I downloaded yesterday that I needed for a customer call, it worked perfectly in my dev container. So that for me, that's like a huge use case around getting things up and running quickly for things I don't have installed on my machine. But this is all the list of features that you can add inside of your container, and by putting, and yes, you can actually do a sudo apt-get whatever and get those into your container, but then the next time you rebuild the container, you've got to do that again. So by adding it in there as a feature, it just makes it easier to get the not have to think about, oh well, what were we working with to what tools did I have inside of there essentially. We looked a little, we talked about the Docker Compose. The other thing I'll mention is the Docker file. I ran into some challenges with, well, not so much challenges. So we had to get .NET Framework installed, the EF .NET Framework installed inside the container so that we could use that because Jeff has it as part of his project. So all of that is great. I believe this locale information was a problem for the psql command. It was looking for a locale, and I think it was c.utf8 is what was like in the container. And I guess I don't understand enough of the inner workings of either the container or the Postgres piece to know if that was even workable, but it basically was forcing me down a path of you need to set these values in order for the psql command to run. So that's why all of this is essentially in here. It creates its own locals file for enus and the various flavors of that, and then gets that up and running. So those were kind of the three things we did: the port, the features, and then this bit here around the locale. And then from that, we now have something that hopefully, once we test this, that anybody can essentially go ahead and pull down and run. So what I'm going to do is, what I did was while we were talking and you were showing your work, Chris, I did a restore on the TagzApp, and it looks like it ran. So all of that is good. So we got all of our packages installed here. We can do. Let's just see if we can get this to run.
I suppose you could just
good.
run from there. We don't need Visual Studio Code's debugging to just see it work, right?
Nope. Only if we wanted to hit a debug point.
Yeah, exactly.
.NET Run.
Now, there were no code changes. Is that right?
There were. I did not change any code that I brought down
Okay.
from Jeff.
Yep, just wondering. So far, the touch points have been the dev container folder, which some was well, maybe there's more, but the
There
touch
is
points were the DevContainer folder, and it wasn't just using the extension to get started, as you've shown. It was finding the little tweaks in the DevContainer file and in the Docker Compose to just push across the finish line. But go ahead.
Yep. There was one other piece that needed to get put in there. So this decoration, or not making it a generic DB context options, whenever I ran the entity framework component, it kept pointing me back to, you need to specify, not a generic, but you need to specify the specific class of DB context options. And it sounded like because Jeff, somewhere in this project, has multiple DB contexts. So we want to make sure that the DB context options we're bringing in are specifically related to this particular context that we're wiring up.
So we do have one minor code change then, and I suppose we'll see, because Jeff's been working with this for a while. He might look at it and say like, "Oh gosh, yeah, that makes sense," or "No, you don't have to do." But the point is, I think one of the goals was, can we get this down, get the DevContainer stuff configured, and it works, and Jeff just goes along his way.
Right.
So,
right.
Anyways,
and it may be something.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it may be something on Jeff's machines. Like it just works because of the way he's got it configured, and it's kind of that just. Yeah, it's something we ran into because we're running it locally, and then the other one is it happens twice. So we did it here. So anywhere we do DB context options, we get to do this.
So we get this great comment here. The zoom in on code really helps us see. Thanks, which is appreciated. And when you're your own producers, there's so many times we've been on this show, and it's like, I'm going, do I have this tool set up? This tool set up? Do I zoom it working? And then even trying to learn, how to highlight and point at code, and then remembering all these little keystrokes, because there's one that'll do arrows, and there's one that you can draw freeform. And in the moment, I often forget them. But definitely, that's we know not only people are watching live, but sometimes even though I think the stream and the resulting video are pretty clear, it can still be nice to zoom in on what we're doing. So you think it'll run? Here we go. .NET run TagzApp.web.
And I think I need this switch, if I'm not mistaken. That's building. TagzApp Web is the. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, you're right. TagzApp Web is the. I think we were both going to say the same thing. If you open this up in a Visual Studio, you're going to see all these projects. That's the one. That's the startup project. I think we were both going to say the exact same thing.
Yep. We've been doing this long enough together that we finish each other's sandwiches, as Scott Hanselman says.
Yeah. So having a daughter who was a pre-K when Frozen came out, it's funny how she was at that age. Is when I would get in the car to take her to pre-K, she would say, "Can we listen to my music?" And it was really a playlist of hers that she didn't know that I was adding stuff, and there were Frozen songs on there, of course. So, cool. In fact, if I remember correctly, the teacher, I don't remember if this was the teacher had put up, I think she put up an image she found as a meme, like on Facebook, or if it was actually in the class itself, where, because this was the height of Frozen, is there was a sign in the room that, again, I think she might have printed out from another source that said, it has, it has been this many days since a workplace accident. It said, it has been 0 days since Frozen songs were sung in this classroom. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, did I say that right? Since they weren't sung in this classroom. Right. Yeah. So in any case, every day, of course. So it's running. TagzApp is running. The development mode is a feature that he added so that you can basically, you don't have to actually connect to the sources to see it work, right?
Right.
But the trick, I remember at the beginning of all this, the first day we worked at TagzApp on the show, the app ran, but it didn't function because it didn't have the Postgres database to talk to.
Yes. So we're still kind of in that, although I think if we knew, I had a conversation with Jeff, and there was definitely some conversation around, well, even without it being wired up to anything, there should be some dummy data that gets thrown in there. I just have not dug in deep enough to figure out, well, what the hashtag is that we need to kind of do that and then be able to pull that back. What I do want to do, though, is just to kind of show, maybe if we go back to here, because I think the interesting context is, well, can I do a, that's great. Can I debug it, right? If I can't debug it, then what's the point here?
Right.
And let's just do this simply. Let's do that. I'm not going to do anything other. Generate C# assets from build and debug. Yeah, I think this
It lets you set up the breakpoint, but I don't know that your Visual Studio Code instance is attached since you ran it in the terminal.
Not. Right.
So
usually I would have some kind of a floating toolbar up here that lets me do my, skip over, skip into, or step into.
So that button to generate C# assets might be the just works easy button. Sometimes in a solution project, you have to go do some configuring, and I don't know if we'll get that, but I agree with you.
We can try that one. Let's try it. So it wants to know.
It wants to know what project, which is cool.
Okay, let's.
That's nice that the extension is smart enough to.
Let's get out of that. Shut down the application there.
I appreciate the extension smart enough to ask us that at least.
Mm-hmm. Oh, not web test. We want web because it sees two of them from here.
Yep.
So that's good. Okay. And then we get this, which is good, right? That's what I would expect to see. Like if I did a .NET New locally on my machine, I would get this .NET Core launch.
Right.
For the web, which is kind of what we want. So let's do that.
That's the one we want. I think we could have probably figured out how to attach, but whatever. This would be nice if this just works. I've done that. I've used that feature. It's hard to use when you only have a few minutes left and you don't remember how it works for sure. But no, I've used it before.
Yeah. So. When I've done it, because I was trying to attach to the EF running because we were getting an error and I couldn't really see what the error was. So I was trying to debug into that. I ended up with like 7 or 8 .NET instances running. I don't know if that was just something that because of everything else I was trying maybe at the same time, but that's, I don't know. There's the cool orange
look at
block
that
at the bottom.
Look at that. Yeah. And you've got your local variable. You're in. You are on that breakpoint.
Yep. So we could basically hit F5, let it finish up the rest of the way. I should get a little notification. Hey, we can open it up in a window.
Well, okay, that's all right. The server certificate stuff, you probably haven't done the .NET Dev Cert. Like it's telling you, probably haven't done that, right?
Well, that's fine. Yeah,
it's like you said, new machine, new container.
Yeah.
So that's okay.
But it looks like it's.
You might be able to run it real quick. I don't know.
So
you need it in the container and so this would be an interesting thing to consider adding, is we need to run the dev certs, the trust. In fact, the command's right there. It was up a little bit. It is showing it to you right there. To generate a developer certificate, run .NET dev certs HTTPS.
Gotcha.
And then and I wonder if
copy that.
I don't know. I wonder if it would just work.
Yeah.
But I think, am I right about this? You'd want to run it from the container, which might be something interesting to add to the startup.
Yeah.
Got a little hanging. Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. So the certificate was generated. I don't remember if you have to do anything else in. I honestly just don't remember. So there may be some setup. Go ahead.
If we look at our launch settings, right?
Uh-huh.
Because that's what it just created for us to go ahead and oh, that's those settings. Okay. What I'm can we just do this? Right, in the interest of time, and make it work, right? Because now I'm not looking for the HTTPS anymore.
Oh, yeah, right. Just use HTTP. Sure. Let's see.
Well, and all the good stuff happens in the last 10 minutes anyway.
Because, so, I mean, it might be interesting, even if we don't make it, maybe even having a script to help people do it that's in the image. I don't know if that's something we could do, or in the repo.
I definitely think that's something that we should include.
Yeah, because the thing for me is you know me, I say it all the time, that there's like several things that I'll kind of say at the start of every project, right? Get your authentication working like first. Do that right away. Don't try to add it in later. Try to code with HTTPS from day one.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely should have that, but this is a demo.
But
and
yeah,
we kind of throw some of the rules out of the way with a demo. But cool. So we've got this here. If we wanted to, it's up and running. I don't know if hot reload is working or any of those kind of things, but I could probably real quick, if it makes sense. Here's the web app. Here's the pages. Here's our index.html, right? So that's our home page. Welcome to the TagzApp. Welcome to
right.
Cool. Save it.
And like you said, in that lower left-hand corner, it says C#.NET and PostgreSQL. DevContainer is running. This is not living on your local desktop. It is running in the DevContainer. So the demo that we think can happen is pull the code straight from GitHub after, this all has to get committed.
Yep.
Pull the code from GitHub, go to Visual Studio Code, and just run it in the DevContainer, and you are working on TagzApp.
Yep. You're working on TagzApp. You can set breakpoints. You can add your features as you need to without having to have your machine, other than being able to run Docker and Visual Studio Code. You don't need to have your machine have any other frameworks or any other modifications done there.
Now, I think you just hit that breakpoint and skipped through it. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah, and I actually turned it off so we won't hit it again.
And there it is.
We made the
change. And there's your modification that you made. Yep.
Yay.
All right. Awesome. Well, you know what? That's cool because that was a little bit of, there's been several shows and you've worked really hard on this.
Yes.
If you can watch the previous shows where Rich really did, he figured this out on the shows a little bit offline. And then it was kind of nice, I think, to have one video putting it all together, because that's the one that people might come back and look for on the site and definitely get added to our playlists and so on.
Yeah. And no truer words were said than those posted by Varel Krieger. Live demos always have unexpected challenges. Awesome. Thank you. So I have to drop and run for another meeting. Chris, are we going to wrap here or are you going to keep going?
No, I think this is it. I think we knew it was going to be a quick show and we just wanted to see this working and then maybe even talk through some of the challenges. So hopefully that helps all of you.
Yep.
If you say, hey, I learned something here, please let us know in the comments. Don't forget to, if you're watching on YouTube, liking the video lets us know these are the kind you want to watch. And if you subscribe to the channel, you'll know when we do more of these shows and streams, and really appreciate the comments we had. We had some folks today who joined. We got this great thing we're going to check out here. The Lanky Scottish Nerd says, here's a Stack Overflow resource on using DevCert. So we'll definitely check that out and make sure
that's awesome
that we're helping people in the final product. Really appreciate folks finding us. And again, I know we sometimes get some Jeff Fritz fans who see that we're working on something he's talking about. So really glad that you all joined us. But in any case, I know you got to get going, Rich, so I'll let you take us out for the day, and we'll be back. We think we'll be back later this week. We'll see.
Yeah, definitely. I may do, you never know. One of us may do solo shows as well. So
Yeah.
something will happen this week.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Thanks everyone for watching. And from the Dev Talk Show, have a great day.